All right, off to our next element, we have shape. And shape essentially is when we have lines intersecting with each other to create what we know as shapes, squares, circles, anything like that. As you can see here, we have a lot of intersecting lines, and as we add more lines and more intersections, we're creating a lot more different shapes, right? It takes 4 intersecting lines to create a rectangle or a square. It'll take 3 to create a triangle, so on. So when we talk about shape, there's generally 2 different categories. We have our geometric shapes, which you can see on screen here. In other words, they're very perfect shapes. So we have those hexagons in the top left of the corner there. We have circles on the top right. And we have lines in the middle. But you can see that the path that those lines take creates perfect circles. So when we talk about shape, it could be the actual intersections of lines themselves, or the implied paths that these lines make. And of course, in the middle there, we see a whole bunch of circles, even though we don't have any completed circles in there. We just have a bunch of arcs moving around. Then we have our organic shapes. And these are non-perfect shapes. They're naturally occurring, right? And if you go out into nature, it's very, very rare. Almost never will you see a geometric shape in nature. Trees are never exactly straight up and down, right? Leaves are never exactly circular, or flowers or petals are never actually completely circular. They're more something like what you would see on the right. Circles in nature, again, are never really 100% spherical, circular. They're more kind of like this changing blob on the left. So usually when we take pictures, it doesn't always show up too much where we have a clash between organic and geometric shapes, but sometimes if you're going for a look that's very natural, you're out in the landscape, you want to try and reduce how much natural or geometric shapes appear, and vice versa. But again, it all depends on the context of the picture. So here's a GIF of pretty much 100%, I think 100% geometric shapes, right? The tree is a perfect sphere or circle. The clouds are perfect lines with circles on each side. The house, everything is straight, except maybe that cat that is jumping over the fence. It's kind of hard to tell with it moving like that. But then here's an example where we have both natural and geometric, organic and geometric shapes. Because here the trees, they're not perfect circles anymore. They're not even really perfect shapes. They're more blobby, right? The only natural or geometric shape I see in the trees are these straight up and down lines on each one here. But besides that, the only other geometric shape is the house, because it'll be man-made, as well as the painting brush, the rod there. Okay, now we come to the last part of our shape element, where we talk about what's called positive space and negative space. Positive space is essentially the bright and, I don't want to say unused, the bright and blank part of our photos, essentially. Not a lot of detail in there. So on the left side of this optical illusion here, our positive space is the white areas. And the white areas in this illusion give us the profiles of 2 people's faces. And because of that white space, we're able to see this dark object in the middle. But oppositely, we have negative space, and that's the dark blank areas of our photograph. So now it's the black areas here that show us the profiles of these 2 people's faces, which allow us to see the white object in the middle. So let's get out of these optical illusions and take a look at some photographs. So here we have a lot of essentially blank space around our subject, in this case this person. So this will be a lot of extra space here. Here's a good example of negative space. because we have a lot of darkness, a lot of dark blank areas, no detail. We can't really see what's in the background, but that allows us to see our subject or objects, in this case the leaves, a lot better. It makes it stand out. It gives it that contrast. And here is an example of a picture I took where you also see a lot of negative space. It's very dark, especially on the left side of the photograph here. Even in the background, it's pretty dark, even though there's some lights. But then it really makes our subject stand out, this little snail, Christmas light snail. So when we start talking about shape, just remember we want to be mindful of whether we're dealing with natural shapes, organic shapes, or if we're dealing with these geometric shapes, right? And pay attention to how much negative or positive space you have in your photograph and whether that helps the photograph, which I think in this case it does. It helps bring our attention to the snail, or if it might not help the photograph, like having too much sky in the picture, for example.